Hello and welcome to the big picture. The first talks on the Iran's nuclear program between Iran and the P5+1 countries after the assumption of office by the new Iranian President Hassan Rouhani is underway in Geneva. The talks have raised hopes of a forward movement in the Iranian nuclear imbroglio, which has led to international sanctions against it. The meeting in Geneva, attended by the United States, France, Britain, China, Russia, all permanent members of the UN Security Council, and Germany, is expected to break some fresh grounds towards finding a solution. The hopes have been raised following the perceptible change in the approach of Iran under the new president to the negotiations, as well as the more placatory statements being made, of course without giving up what they call as their inalienable right to enrich uranium as a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Today we will discuss whether the Geneva meeting will lead to building trust between the two parties and find ways towards a solution to the imbroglio. To discuss this, I have with me an eminent panel of experts: Dr.G. Balchandran, consulting fellow at the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis; Rajiv Sikri, former secretary at the Ministry of External Affairs; Professor A.K. Pasha, Director Gulf Studies Program at the JNU; and Qamar Agha, a senior journalist and someone well versed in the affairs of West Asia. Welcome to all of you. Dr. Balchandran, I would like to come to you first. This meeting, which is underway in Geneva, do you see this as different from what has happened in the past? Do you think that the new president has been able to, give some fillip to these talks?
Oh, definitely yes. I mean, this is a very welcome development. But I think this will be the first of many meetings that has to be held before they will even come to a reasonable amount of agreement on what both sides should do. I think much work needs to be done. This is only the groundwork saying, yes, we are in agreement that we should come to an agreement.
Right. Mr. Sikri? But there seems to be a lot of skepticism still, even as the talks began, or even just a few days before the talks began. These P5 countries plus Germany and all of them are taking it very, they're being cautiously optimistic. Would you say they're cautiously optimistic?
I would like to differentiate the position of the European countries from that of the United States,
okay.
Which is got its own lobby inside Congress, and which is very influenced by what Israel thinks.
Right.
Now, Israel is going to be a very important factor. We have seen how, despite President Rouhani's moderate statements and speech at the UN General Assembly, Prime Minister Netanyahu came out in a very virulent language,
yes,
and has been constantly repeating the point that you can't trust the Iranians, and advocating a very hardline approach. So I think that President Obama will have to take a call on how much he is going to be able to resist the Israeli pressure, how much of his political capital he will like to expend in bringing round Congress. And a third factor is going to be the attitude of Saudi Arabia, which is a little worried that a US-Iran rapprochement would reduce their influence and bargaining power in the region.
Okay, that's interesting. Professor Pasha, you think that the pressure on Obama, there was this bill which was introduced in the U.S. Congress in 2000, earlier this year. So there are, despite what Mr. Sikri says is the counter pressure from Israel, do you think there are enough pressures within the U.S. Congress for Obama to take a more moderate view on this?
Yes, I think for the first time a sizable number of congressmen have taken real initiative to send a clear message that enough is enough. We need to attend this nuclear file with all seriousness, especially in the background of positive signals emerging from Iran. notwithstanding the high voltage mobilization or lobbying from the Israelis,
Right.
the Jewish lobby. There are two things. One is the financial crisis has weakened. Number two, the Syrian crisis also has shown the unwillingness of Obama for any war. And he would like to postpone the military option until he is president. Number two, there is also this meeting of eye between Moscow and Washington.
Right.
Russia also equally detests nuclear Iran. But the technical aspects are mind-boggling. Whether Iran will be allowed to have enriched uranium or the plutonium way at the Agha reactor, heavy water plant, or the centrifuges will be allowed to remain in Iran or to shift out or to close the Fordo nuclear plant or the Natanz plant or the various other hidden plants. So there is this domestic concern in America whether a deal should involve two things. One is easing of sanctions beyond what has been proposed in a major way, or to watch and see how Iran monitors or implements the agreement, including the additional protocol agreement or enrichment not beyond 5%, which is the benchmark of the Western position, whereas the Iranians want 20% and above.
So, but the fact is that these, as Dr. Balchandran says, there's still a long way to go before we come to that stage. I think, Qamar, what has changed in Iran domestically for the new president to be a little bolder than what anybody else has been and to take such a moderate stance, or is it his own predilections which has taken the country towards this kind of a situation?
You see, there are three things. First is, Rouhani and centrist or moderate camp have been propagating for a very long time that we should.
He
himself comes from the same.
Right, and
he's
he was a
backed by
nuclear negotiator.
He's backed by Khatami. He's backed by other moderate top leaders, including Rafsanjani.
Yes.
Second thing, realization. Financial constraints within Iran. Because of sanctions are really biting for them. And third thing, there is a desire on part of the West also, to have reconciliation, because they have also ruled out the military option. Basically, nobody wants to go in for another war in Middle East. So neither the American army is prepared, nor do they have, as he said, economic constraints. Problems are there in America. Their economy has also slowed down along with the Western nations. So nobody wants a war, basically, in the Western nations also. And there is the only way is to solve out this.
No, but within Iran, what is the kind of atmosphere which has been created since the election of the new president? Do you think that has made a lot of difference? What about the supreme leader? Because he is still very skeptical about.
He said he came out with a statement. He issued a very good statement. One of his famous statement, which was picked by Obama also, that he declared that. A nuclear weapon is a weapon of mass destruction, which is anti-Islam. They will not build that. And second thing, last couple of years, 2 years, Iran has realized, that they have gone a bit too far.
Okay.
They cannot go it. Now they are willing to accept, that less than even 20% of enrichment, which means, they'll say 10 on 5, heckling would be there. They have good carpet merchants, and they know this art very well, So that will continue, and plus centrifuges, yes, they said that they will not leave that. And they have also said that they'll not send their already enriched material to Western Europe or America or Russia or any other country. They said there are technology available, you can reduce it. We can come down to lower levels also. So there is a first time, after Khatami, the first time, they are coming with a very positive statements, welcome by the Western Europe and America. Yes, but Americans will have to see from their own eyes. If they continue to see from Israeli prism, then I'm sorry, I mean, nothing will.
Nothing will
Just
go.
to supplement a short point, so there are two things. One is because of the sanctions and all the problems which have accumulated, the mullahs are under pressure on good governance, lack of good governance.
And America is threatening that by 2015 they will stop, if nothing happens, they will stop the oil sales of Iran to everywhere in the
But
world.
I
Exactly.
think that is not working. That will not work for a very long time.
That will not, at least,
work
but the
because
threat
of
may work.
even at the moment, more and more countries are willing to buy.
That's right,
Iran,
but the
because the
threat-
Iranians are very smart. They are selling it cheap. It's available. They have developed
And
a
also
number of
the-
mechanism to come out of it. Now
Right.
Oman, they are saying
And also more than half of population is youth. They have played a vital role
Vital
in this
role in
election.
election.
They expect changes
Okay.
in the economic
Dr.
field.
Balchandran, how far is Iran from acquiring, weapons grade uranium?
Oh, 20 to 90 is not very difficult. Beyond 20, there's not much use for enriched uranium, to some extent in, say, research reactor. Other than that, there's not much use. So I think, but since the definition of a highly enriched uranium is 20%, I think the Iranian went up to that. I read a report by, I think, one of the ministers or senior members saying that they don't need all the amount of highly enriched uranium that they got. They are willing to see what they can do with the excess that they have. But there are two or three things that's an absolute must. They are not going to, and there's no point in asking them to close down or shut down the enrichment plants.
Right.
Two,
You mean to say it is not necessary also?
it's not necessary. No, and certainly they will not do that, okay?
Okay.
Two, there's no point, nobody will, not even the US will take at a word that our religion says bomb is a bad thing. They will want to verify it. Three, the only agency that can verify it, IAEA.
Right.
And the only way IAEA can do is with the additional protocol.
Right.
Now, just like when the Syrian negotiations were taking place, apart from the two Secretary of State in US and the Foreign Minister of Russia, they had a whole lot of technical people looking at, experts on arms control and this thing to see how it can be done. Any final resolution of the Iranian, that is mixing, bringing together the Iranian claim that we do not want nuclear bomb, we are
Right.
not working for it, and the Americans and the FIVA saying we want. Are we sure that you are not doing that? You would need at that point, to, just like in Syrian case, to bring that arms control and technical experts both from United States, Russia, and to some extent from Iran to see how a viable mechanism can be found so that IAEA, just like OPCW was done, could be asked to verify that Iran does not have any nuclear activity which is not peaceful.
Right.
The second issue will be, it has to be time bound for the simple reason, the Iranians quite naturally and justifiably will not agree to any program on the nuclear program without some relaxation of what you might call the sanction. What is a proportional sanction is going to be a big, big problem.
Right.
Just saying that, I'll give 20% out, Pasha will not do. Nor will they. So that is going to be a major issue. You need, at that point, both the parties to bring in the technical experts to work out, just like in Syrian case. They said you will do it, we'll do it by November 1st, we'll
Right.
do it by middle. You will have to do that so that at that time, see, the US sanctions are the easiest to remove because they are unilateral.
Okay.
On the other hand, the US Congress, with all what respect to them, is not at the moment very keen on removing any sanction on Iran.
Unless they are sure about the...
Yes. On the other hand, the European sanctions, multilateral sanctions, it is very difficult to take it out because once you take it out, you can't put them
You
again.
can't put
so
them
it's-
back again.
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Sikri, this ultimate, from what Dr. Balchandran says, and it's going to be a real challenge for the diplomats now to put all these things in place, and from what is happening in Geneva, from there, and the positive atmosphere which prevails in Geneva, you think that will help the diplomats in putting all these complicated things in place, and being able and Iranians themselves being able to convince everybody that their intentions are sincere?
I'd like to put this nuclear issue in a wider context, because the crisis did not arise in isolation, and I don't think it will be resolved
in isolation.
The United States has had an up and down relationship with Iran. There was the 53 coup, there was the honeymoon during the time of the Shah,
right,
the 79 revolution and the hostages and the problem that created, the Iraq-Iran war where the Americans were on the other side. But then when you come to 2001 and Afghanistan happened, the Iranians were cooperating
right
with the United States.
Right.
And then they found that they were suddenly a member of the axis of evil. And the next year you had the Iraq invasion. Now, I think that the nuclear dossier was taken by the United States from the IAEA to the UN Security Council, not so much because of the nuclear factor itself, but because the United States wanted leverage over Iran for the sake of the larger neighborhood. Because what had happened was that after knocking out Afghanistan, after knocking out Saddam, Iran became the undisputed leader of the region.
Right.
There was no balancing. So they wanted to have some leverage on Iran. And that is why the nuclear dossier
emerged.
It's worth recalling here that this additional protocol, although Iran did not sign it, Iran was actually implementing the matter.
Absolutely.
The additional protocol. So it is not that the crisis could not have been resolved at that time. But the United States pushed to take it to the UN Security Council. Even later on, you had the Turkey and Brazil initiative, which was shot down by the United States, not because the initiative in itself was flawed. In fact, that envisaged that the enriched uranium would be taken out of Iran,
right,
which may not be on the table today.
Yeah.
But because geopolitically it did not suit the United States.
And the pressure of Israel.
And the pressure of?
Israel.
Oh, of course, the pressure of Israel is a constant one.
Right.
That goes without saying. Now, I think the geopolitical situation has changed, as has been pointed out by Professor Pasha and Mr. Qamar, that the geopolitical position has changed, and therefore the Americans would also be looking for a deal. You are unlikely to see a more reasonable Iranian leadership if this present opportunity goes away.
Right.
You're unlikely to see that in a while. You're also unlikely to see a more sober president than President Obama, who has to somehow justify why he got the Nobel Peace Prize. So it's 5 years into his presidency, and there's still no reason we can judge why he
got it at all.
So a deal like Iran and so forth would help him to burnish his credentials.
To some extent, Syria has managed to redeem some extent.
Well, it was under pressure. The Russians got more credit. But anyway, yes. But if he can do something on Iran, get things under control. But as I said at the outset, the Israeli factor and the Saudi factor will complicate life for him. So I think that a lot depends on the determination of President Obama, how much he is wanting to engage Iran. Because as Dr. Balchandran pointed out, enrichment, I think, will be a red line.
Okay.
Not because the Iranians want a bomb, not necessarily because of that, but because it's a question of face. You have this right under the NPT.
Right.
How do you say that we have given up?
Exactly.
This right?
When others have it, why not we?
And again, you come to the Israeli factor. The Israelis, they make so much noise.
Yes.
But because the press and media is controlled by them, nobody asks the simple question, but hello, what about your nuclear program?
Exactly.
And IAEA inspections.
Professor Pasha, Mr. Sikri said that it's not so much about acquiring a nuclear weapon. I mean, Iran doesn't. Do you think Iran really doesn't have that ambition, or is it just a facade which it says that as Dr. Balchandran was pointing out, that people will not believe it easily when it says that nuclear weapon is a weapon of mass destruction. Islam doesn't permit it and things like that. Do they have nuclear ambitions or not?
I think, yes, in the middle of the Iran-Iraq war, they decided in some
they have to
time
acquire
in
it.
1986 they must have a credible deterrent.
Right.
Because it was an unprovoked war according to them, and a lot of damage was inflicted on them, and all the GCC countries, America also was behind Saddam Hussein for 8 long years. That apart, their conventional military capability also is quite substantial.
Okay.
Missiles and the various paraphernalia.
Okay.
The second point I wish to add is, the enriched uranium which they have, 20% or 18,000 centrifuges, the West might demand that these should be converted into rods for producing electricity,
Right.
to make sure that they don't use it for bomb making.
Right.
That will be a source of negotiations, and they are willing to shift to their island, Kish Island, not outside the country.
Okay.
That they are very firm that they will not be willing to close their nuclear facilities, except not to commission the Arak heavy water plant, the second one, which they have built. Apart from this, the larger geopolitical picture which is emerging is the Americans and NATO would be withdrawing from Afghanistan.
Right.
And Hamid Karzai is not as cooperative as the Americans thought. And Pakistan also is not likely to give up its Taliban option. So they want to keep Iran option on their side.
Okay.
And then except for one place in Central Asia, the Russians and the Chinese are cornering the Americans in a big way. That also is an important tension of the Americans. And then you have the Iraq file, the Syrian file, you have the Hezbollah file, the Arab-Israeli conflict, and various other places where Iran has built up clout in Bahrain.
What about Mr. Sikri's observation about Saudi Arabia?
Well, Saudi Arabia and Israel are seeing eye to eye as far as Iran is concerned, but they can't do much about it.
Okay.
The Saudis did press on Syria, but they are no takers. Neither the Russians, nor the Americans, nor the EU. Same is the case with Israel.
Are you saying that Saudi Arabia is losing its clout in the region? Will lose a clout in the region if there is some kind of a agreement which worked out with Iran?
It is not only Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has no match to Israeli capabilities, both military and non-military.
Right.
In Israel also has been told to behave, not only by the Europeans but also by the Americans. Obama has unmistakably made it clear that military option is not what he is considering, and he has other things. So in that way, both Saudi Arabia and Israel feel, in a rare convergence of interest between the two on Iran, but they can't do much beyond protest and offering threats and blandishment. Other than that, it is mere rhetoric. So in that way, the determination, like in the case of Syria, both how Moscow and Washington decided that Syria should give up. I must also underline here that the Russians used their tremendous influence over Assad to give up. He was not willing, in
Absolutely.
fact.
So Russia may play an important role here
similar
also.
role also.
Here.
Yeah.
In fact, Qamar, there is some unsubstantiated report saying that Russia has already convinced Iran about its enrichment and things like that. So you think Iran will listen to Russia?
Definitely, they have listened earlier also. You should understand one more thing, Actually, Iranians are not going for a bomb. But they're trying to acquire technology. Capability or technology for making one. 20% enrichment is enough for them. They have achieved that, And as Balchandran mentioned, from 20 to 90 is not difficult to reach.
Right.
So they have already achieved, they are satisfied, they are happy with it,
No,
They're not going to make...
But the question is, will they give up their nuclear ambitions?
They know the limits. They understand very well this is the limit, they can't go beyond. They may be having ambitions, but they can't go beyond that, So at the moment, they'll postpone it, for some other time or leave it, for some time. for them is at the moment, the sanctions and other things are very important. They should be lifted. Second thing, Iran is not posing any threat to Western Europe and America. It's a very small country compared to these people, but it has challenged the Israeli supremacy in the region.
Right.
That is a major problem, and they will continue to challenge that.
Right.
So here comes the major crux, the major bargain, this thing. Now, because last 5-10 years, Israel has not been able to suppress neither Hezbollah nor Hamas in that region.
Right.
And this was mainly because of Iranian money and training to these people, supply of weapons or whatever you call it, because of only Iran. So that is a major challenge before them. Here would be some bargaining, I suppose, would take place, what. But Iranians are not going to abandon at least Hezbollah. Hamas has already fallen. They are no more with the Iranians, after Syrian crisis. And one more thing is very important, Americans have given a lot of roles for Saudi to play, Saudi and Qatar, but they have messed up in the whole region. That was their capability to deliver, And other thing, Americans have also realized suddenly, that Hezbollah, not the Hezbollah or Iran is a major threat to them, but Al-Qaeda, because that has come up to Mali and now
Right.
what is happening in
Africa.
in Africa, particularly Libya, and Prime Minister was kidnapped, and the way Kenya, was
Yes.
the whole episode, and Boko Haram and whole lot of network of Al-Qaeda, which the Europeans are very worried about,
Okay.
because North
So-
Africa is very close to them.
Dr. Balchandran, how much will Europe be able to pressure United States in this, as he's talking
Not
about?
very much. Look.
And what kind of assurances in the talks which are taking place now? What kind of assurances will this group ask Iran to give to start off the negotiation process
course.
and take it somewhere?
See, if we accept that Iran should, under NPT and all other reasons, should have an enrichment facility, and they need not and no right or somebody to demand they close down anything.
Right.
Question is this: how do you prevent a breakout? Unless there is some
How do
clear
you prevent a?
breakout, in the sense that you have suddenly you go and build 20 to 30, how long it will take? Now, all said and done, unless that is assured, and as I said, that will require a lot of detailed negotiation. And Israel is a wild card. Israel does not require anything from United States to initiate an attack on its own. It has got both the technical and the military capability to do
But
so.
you think they will dare do that?
Wait, no. Look, just as they may not, they will say, look, if their view is this, a breakout situation will pose an existential threat to them, they will do it. Let's not be any mistake about that Israel
Okay,
will be.
well, I think I don't know whether others would agree with your this thing. And Mr. Sikri, finally, I want your final words on this. That what kind of concessions are Iran expected to give to start off this positive negotiation process?
I think Iran will certainly have to accept the additional protocol. It will have to stop enrichment further. The negotiations will be what to do with the enriched material.
Right.
What is the level of enrichment which is permissible to Iran, if anything at all? I think these will be the issue. And of course, from the Iranian side, they'll say, well, what about the sanctions? What sanctions are you going to lift?
Exactly.
So that it's worth our while to give all these concessions.
Absolutely. Professor Pasha and Qamar, very quickly, 10 seconds.
Iranians for the last 10 years have been negotiating. They have been hard bargainers. They have not given up anything,
Right.
an inch. And it is very unlikely that they will do so quickly.
Okay.
So there will be benchmarks step by step.
Okay.
According to the banking concessions, sanctions, they'll go step by step.
Right.
I fully agree with him, but one thing, they are willing to come down with the with the enrichment, from 20 to maybe 5 or 10 or maybe
So
5.
that itself should start should take the negotiations forward.
The economic incentives are also
Yes,
important,
that is-
oil and gas.
Okay, I think on that note we need to end. This is it's in fact on a positive note, but we'll have to wait and watch what will be the outcome of the Geneva meeting. But the atmosphere is positive, and that itself is something which we need to look forward to. Thanks to all my guests, Dr. Balchandran, Rajiv, Sikri, Prof. Pasha, and Qamar Agha. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in Big Picture, same time tomorrow.